The phone slips to the bottom of a coat pocket. The camera is still recording. In the shaky frame, all we see is a patch of darkness, the sound of shoes hurrying over wet concrete, heavy breathing, and far away. A warm yellow light spilling from a quiet house in a sleeping neighborhood. Every now and then, the camera hits the fabric of the coat, the screen going dark, then flickering back on. No faces, no dialogue, no conversations, just footsteps, rain hitting the ground, and a growing feeling that something is very, very wrong. When detectives in Ohio watched the final seconds of this string of clips, they fell completely silent because they realized the person holding the phone was the killer, and the woman who accidentally appeared in those blurry, shaky frames was the victim who had been shot to death not long before. All of those clips that looked like accidental pocket videos were actually a stalker's visual diary, recording every move, every streetlight, every silhouette of his target, before he finally carried out a murder in the rain-soaked night. This is the story of none Morgan Fox, and of the nice guy who convinced himself he had the right to turn a woman's life into his sick little game. In the early hours of October 28, 2020 in Stark County, Ohio, the clock reads 1:30 a.m. Most of the neighborhood is fast asleep. The lights inside almost every house are off, leaving only a few yellow street lamps stretching pools of light across the wet road. In a small house, Cindy Rowe, a woman in her 50s is not sleeping. She sits up as she's done countless nights before. At the time her body now knows by heart, time to call her daughter. She reaches for her phone on the nightstand and taps on the name she knows by heart. Every mother is the same. No matter how grown up her child is, no matter how capable that child is of using an alarm, she still wants to hear their voice with her own ears, to know they're okay. After a few rings, a young woman's voice comes through. A little raspy with sleep, but waking up quickly. "I'm up, Mom. I'm getting ready for work." That's our Morgan Fox, 29 years old, a single mother to an 8-year-old girl named Amelia. At that very moment, Morgan is standing in front of the mirror, one hand holding her phone, the other tying up her hair, work clothes neatly laid out on the chair. She works the night shift at FedEx Ground, a package sorting facility where conveyor belts run non-stop while the city sleeps. The conversation lasts only a few minutes. Cindy reminds her daughter to drive safely, to take care of herself. Morgan, "Yeah, Mom's like she always does. Thanks her for calling." And the two wish each other a safe day. Neither of them knows this will be the last time they ever hear each other's voice. Morgan hangs up, drops the phone on the table, and goes back to her routine, double-checking her bag, wallet, keys, employee badge. Before heading out, she glances into the small bedroom where Amelia usually sleeps. Tonight, the girl is staying at Grandma's, but the habit of looking into that room is still there. The blanket is folded, a few stuffed animals are piled in the corner. Morgan smiles faintly, pulls on her coat, and opens the door. Outside, a light rain is falling. Water glistens on the asphalt, the streetlights reflecting like long yellow streaks on black. You can hear the soft drip from the roof onto the front steps. The air is cold, damp, and silent. Morgan pulls the collar of her coat tighter, locks the door, and walks toward her gray SUV parked in the driveway. All she's thinking about is the long shift ahead, the packages, the noise, the tiredness, and then that moment in the morning when she'll get to come home and hug her daughter. She has no idea that somewhere out there in the darkness and the rain, a man has arrived before her and is waiting. Not a coworker, not her boyfriend, but a stalker who has spent months watching, recording, imagining, and has finally decided that if he can't have her in his fantasy life, he'll destroy her in real life. To understand how horrifying this story truly is, we need to start with how Morgan lived, not how she died. Morgan became a mom young. In her early 20s, she gave birth to Amelia. The biological father didn't stay, but Morgan did. She didn't run. She stayed, took full responsibility, and learned how to be both mom and dad at the same time. In those early years, she took any job she could, Mornings, evenings, nights. Anything to pay the rent, pay for food, for school, for her daughter's future. To people around her, Morgan had that girly girl vibe. She liked makeup, nails, cute outfits, selfies, social media. But behind the mascara and pretty clothes was a woman who was incredibly strong, who always put her daughter first. To Amelia, her mom wasn't just mom, she was a superhero, a best friend. They played dress-up together, put on blush, tried lipstick, braided each other's hair. They laughed in their little kitchen, took photos that later would show up in news reports as victim photos. When Morgan got hired at a FedEx ground, it was a turning point. It was stable work, steady income, night shifts that gave her daytime hours to take Amelia to school and back. She worked hard, carefully, without complaining. Soon, because of her performance, she was promoted to manager. For a young single mom, that was huge. At FedEx, she also met Jason Scarntia, a man who was also a single dad. Two people who had both been left behind, both struggling to raise a child, found each other between the noise of conveyor belts and the clatter of crates. They began dating, then got serious, then moved into a house together with their two little girls, a place with a yard and grass and room to play. It was the kind of home Morgan had always dreamed of for Amelia. From the outside, Morgan's life looked like a model story, a strong, hard-working mother who had survived the hardest years and had finally reached a bit of peace. But behind the scenes, on those night shifts, between rows of shelves and pallets, there were eyes on her, watching her in a very different way. Among her co-workers, some were just jokers, immature jokes, stupid pranks. But some started crossing lines. They hid her clipboard, moved her things around, made comments about her clothes. Then the comments shifted into crude remarks about her body. Even though she was a manager, she still had to listen to those words and try to shrug them off. When she reported it, what she got back weren't protections, but looks that said she was too sensitive, making a big deal out of nothing, not fitting in. Then came October 8th, 2020, the day the line was crossed in a way that couldn't be ignored. During a shift, Morgan suddenly realized her phone was gone. For someone working nights, a phone is the lifeline. To her daughter, to her mom, to everything outside that cold warehouse. She searched everywhere, asked everyone. Nobody knew anything until she walked up to Jason McDermott, a male co-worker she had once considered a friend. We'll call him Jason Turner. Security cameras captured that moment. Morgan confronting him, Jason denying, dodging. But Morgan's eyes didn't leave his jacket pocket. Finally, under her intense stare and firm questions, he reluctantly pulled her phone, out of his pocket and handed it back. In that moment, Morgan understood her boundaries had been violated in a brutal way. Not just because the phone was personal, but because it contained photos and videos. Private, intimate things meant only for her boyfriend. Later, she would learn the full truth. 3 male co-workers, including Jason too, had unlocked her phone, read her messages, browsed her pictures, and watched her intimate videos. Then laughed and talked about them. Things that were supposed to exist only between Morgan and the man she loved suddenly became entertainment for a group of night shift guys. Morgan felt humiliated, furious, and scared. She immediately reported it to supervisors and HR. What she got in return was mostly a few written warnings, some light disciplinary notes, and in some cases, she was the one being called into an office to discuss dress code. The men who had violated her privacy got a couple of pen strokes on paper. Morgan got treated like she was making trouble. That was the last straw. Morgan decided she wouldn't let this be swept under the rug. Along with a female co-worker, she began drafting a formal complaint to higher-level HR beyond the local building. In it, she detailed each incident of harassment, the phone theft, and the weak, dismissive response of management. Morgan, who had been forced to be quiet so many times in her life, was finally ready to fight back. That complaint would never be sent. 2 weeks later, Morgan was shot to death in her own driveway. Around 6 a.m. that morning, Jason, Morgan's boyfriend, woke up. He assumed Morgan had been at work for hours since her shift started at 2:30 a.m. He went downstairs to make breakfast, still half asleep. Then in a random glance out the window, he froze. Morgan's gray SUV was still sitting in the driveway. His heart started racing. Maybe the car wouldn't start. Maybe she got dizzy and came back. Dozens of possibilities flashed through his mind. He rushed to the front door, barefoot, opened it, and ran out into the cold, damp air. What he saw made his world collapse. Morgan was slumped in the driver's seat, half her body still inside, the rest hanging out of the car. Her head was tilted at an unnatural angle, hair messy and matted. Her skin was cold under his hand, on her head, near her ear, and higher up. Dark patches of dried blood were soaked into her hair in the seat. On the passenger door, there was a clear hole, the exit of a bullet. Hands shaking, Jason 1 grabbed his phone and dialed 911.
I need help right now.
In the recording,
He's coming back.
his voice trembles.
I think he saw me. Please
I think
hurry.
my girlfriend is dead. She's really cold. There's blood on her head. I can't feel a pulse. Paramedics and deputies arrived as quickly as they could, but it was too late. They confirmed Morgan had died hours before. The preliminary examination showed she'd been shot twice in the back of the head, at close range. One near her left ear, one higher up. Either shot alone would have been fatal. Something else stood out immediately. Her purse was still slung over her shoulder. Cash in the center console was untouched in plain sight. Her phone, keys, and other items were scattered around. But nothing showed signs of being rummaged through for valuables. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This looked like a targeted execution. Near the scene, by a white fence, they found his tire tracks, sunk into the wet grass. Mud had been flung onto the wooden boards in a curved spray. Someone had parked there, hugging the fence line, likely facing back toward the road. When they left, they'd gunned the engine and thrown mud everywhere. It had rained steadily that night. Morgan was shot around 2 to 2:15 a.m. The scene wasn't secured until close to 7 a.m., nearly 5 hours more of rain, enough to wipe out footprints, wash away trace evidence, dilute gunshot residue on surfaces, no shell casings, no clear fingerprints, no neighbors awake to hear the shots. Everyone was inside, doors closed, drowning in the white noise of rainfall. But one thing remained, lying on the wet concrete, not far from Morgan's body. Her phone. For detectives, the circle of suspicion always starts with the people closest to the victim. Jason 1. The boyfriend, the man who lived with her, who found the body, was naturally the first to be brought in for questioning. They replayed the 911 call, watched how he behaved at the scene, relatively calm, a bit numb, not hysterical. They heard him say he hadn't heard any gunshots, knew nothing until he woke up. They remembered how he had asked to go back inside to grab socks, then suddenly changed his mind when told an officer had to accompany him. To an experienced investigator, those were all reasons to raise an eyebrow. They dug into his text messages with Morgan. There were arguments. Even a time when Morgan had hit him and he'd angrily texted, "I'll never love you again." But reading beyond that, they saw the rest. Talk about their daughters, about dinner, about weekends, apologies, heart emojis. Yes, there was conflict, but there was also clearly love, responsibility, plans for the future. There was nothing to suggest a man planning to kill his partner. When they searched the house, the reason Jason 1 had been reluctant to let them into his room quickly became clear. In a sock drawer, they found a small bag of marijuana. Not a weapon, not hidden evidence of murder, just a petty secret he didn't want to deal with on top of everything else. Meanwhile, from Morgan's family and co-workers, another name kept coming up. Jason McDermott, Jason 2 on me. He was the one holding her phone on October 8th, had once been friendly with her, just co-workers, had a trail of complaints from other young women about stalking and harassment, and was acting in a deeply disturbing way after Morgan's death. The family said that at a candlelight vigil in front of Morgan's house, a gathering they hadn't even been properly informed about, Jason too showed up unexpectedly. While everyone was grieving, he went straight to the car where little Amelia was sitting, opened the door, squeezed in beside her, put a stuffed animal in her hands, stroked her hair, called her so pretty, and said, "I don't want you to forget me." Morgan's mother shouted at him to get out of the car. He ignored her like he couldn't even hear until a male friend pulled him away. It didn't feel like a coworker paying his respects. It felt like a man desperate not to lose the last tangible connection to the woman he'd obsessed over, through her child. When detectives got access to Jason 2's phone, their original focus was the GPS data. Based on timestamps, the phone's location history seemed to show it sitting at home all night during the murder. On the surface, that looked like a solid alibi. But as they dug deeper into his photo library, videos, and apps, a twisted world started to take shape. His device contained dozens and dozens of pictures and clips of Morgan, screenshots and saves from her Facebook and Snapchat, obvious spy-style videos. Morgan washing her hands, walking past shelves, talking to someone in the warehouse, all filmed from behind, from corners, from a distance. Shaky pocket recordings, the camera peeking from inside a coat pocket, wobbling, catching parts of a house, including Morgan's home, porch light and all. They discovered Jason 2 was using a third-party app to silently save her stories and clips from social media without triggering any screenshot or save notifications. Morgan didn't just appear in his feed, she was being archived, collected. Even more disturbing, he used these images to construct an entire fake relationship online. On Skype, using the nickname JustAmonica69. He pretended to be a woman in a lesbian relationship with Morgan. He sent photos and videos of Morgan to another man, describing graphic sexual scenarios between them that had never happened. In his mind, Morgan was no longer a person with her own will, family, and boundaries. She had been turned into a character walk in a story he wrote, directed, and acted in alone. When Morgan found out about the phone theft, openly expressed her anger, cut him off, refused to speak to him, blocked his number, and especially when she started preparing a formal complaint, that little movie in his head began to fall apart, and Jason too couldn't stand it. The detectives replayed the crime scene in their minds. The rainy night, the tire tracks in wet grass, mud splattered on the white fence, the critical window of time when Morgan usually left for work. They turned to Jason 2's car, a Unity blue Ford Focus hatchback. They measured the wheelbase, tire width, track, the pattern of the ruts. Everything matched. The tracks left by the mystery vehicle next to Morgan's house. Then they found CCTV footage from a nearby Sheetzer gas station. On the morning of October 28th, right after his shift, while most co-workers were simply driving home to sleep, what did Jason 2 do? He drove straight into the automatic car wash. The Focus rolled slowly under the water jets and brushes, but when it reached the section where powerful nozzles sprayed the mic wheels and undercarriage, he lingered. The car stopped, then backed up, then went forward again, as if making absolutely sure every trace of mud, grass, and possibly evidence from the crime scene was blasted away. After exiting the machine, he got out, bent down, and carefully inspected his tires. He had no idea a camera was watching. If you look at that moment in isolation, it could just be a fussy man taking pride in a clean car. But side by side with the tire tracks at the scene, the rain, and the fact that his phone just happened to be asleep at home at the exact time of the murder, it stops looking like coincidence. Detectives pulled traffic cam footage from roads near Morgan's neighborhood. They captured the blue Ford Focus, driving toward her area at about 1:38 a.m., then heading back in the direction of his residence at around 2:17 a.m. That perfectly lined up with the time Morgan woke up after that call with her mom, when she normally walked out to her car, the window in which 2 quiet shots could have been fired, too soft to be noticed over the rain, closed windows, in a sleeping neighborhood. Finally, they brought in one explosives in GSR dog to inspect the Ford Focus. The dog sniffed around, then stopped at the driver's door and barked, indicating gunshot residue had once been present there. Putting it all together, they had a man with a history of harassment and stalking at work, a pathological obsession with Morgan, secret recordings, hoarded pictures, and a fabricated online fantasy life. A victim who had just cut him off and was preparing to report him formally. Access to a gun from his father's collection matching the caliber used in the murder. A deliberate decision to leave his phone at home to create a fake alibi. A car seen near the victim's home at exactly the right time. Tire tracks matching his vehicle. Immediate post-crime efforts to wash away physical evidence. And on top of that, the shaky pocket videos he recorded, the same kind of footage that opened this story, accidentally became visual evidence of a predator stalking his target. And in April 2021, in a Stark County courtroom, Jason McDermott sat at the defense table. He wore glasses, had a neat haircut, the look of a quiet, unassuming office guy, the kind of co-worker you might never glance at twice. His lawyer did what many defense attorneys do in such cases, try to redirect doubt toward Jason once, suggesting that Morgan's relationship with her boyfriend was toxic, that they had argued, that there might have been jealousy, implying he could have been the real killer. But the evidence and testimony painted a very different picture. Messages between Morgan and Jason showed arguments, yes, but also love, apologies, co-parenting discussions, and planning a future together. There was no pattern of escalating violence, no sign of a man ready to ambush his partner in the driveway. With Jason too, an entire harassment file emerged, a young female co-worker who said he followed her to a private appointment even though he hadn't driven her there. Spammy, relentless messages, obsessive likes, comments and DMs on every social post. The stolen phone incident and the invasive viewing of Morgan's private photos and videos. The Skype account, Just Monica 69, with fabricated romantic stories featuring Morgan. The vigil scene where he tried to touch and emotionally anchor himself to the victim's child. Morgan's family, female co-workers, and friends took the stand. They described feeling scared, violated, constantly watched, and yet often being brushed off or not taken seriously when they raised concerns. During closing arguments, the prosecutor said something that cut through the room. This is not a story about unrequited love. This is a story about unrequited ownership. In Jason's mind, Morgan belonged to him, not as an equal partner in a real relationship, but as an object in his mental collection, an asset he believed he had a claim over. When she dared to say no, block his number, gather evidence to report him to people who could actually punish him, he decided to erase her from the physical world, the way he could erase a file from his phone. The most haunting moment of the trial didn't come from the lawyers or the judge. It came from a small 8-year-old girl, Amelia. She stood in court, looking at the man who'd killed her mother, and read a statement she'd written herself. "I used to think monsters weren't real, but you proved me wrong. You made me lose my mom. I wish she could see me graduate, see me get married. But you took all of that away from me." The courtroom went completely silent. Adults, judges, jurors, reporters, spectators lowered their eyes. This child had summed up exactly what Jason had done. He hadn't just killed a woman. He'd killed all the future moments that were supposed to belong to that mother and daughter. The jury didn't need long. Jason McDermott was convicted of aggravated murder, or SURN, menacing by stalking. His sentence was life in prison without the possibility of parole. He will die behind bars in a world where he can no longer spin fake lives off stolen images. For Morgan's loved ones, criminal justice alone wasn't enough. Looking back, they saw a pattern. Morgan had cried out for help multiple times. Another female co-worker had previously reported Jason. There had been bright red flags about his stalking behavior even before he fixated on Morgan. Yet the workplace failed to protect her. Instead, it treated these as minor interpersonal issues, something to smooth over, not root out. The family sued FedEx Ground. They argued that the company allowed a toxic culture to persist, brushed aside or downplayed harassment complaints, failed to act decisively to prevent a known stalker from continuing to target women at work. In an interview, Morgan's mother said, "If they had done their job from the beginning, my daughter would still be alive." Eventually, FedEx agreed to a settlement of $4 million. A large portion of that money was placed into a trust for Amelia, so that when she is older, she'll have at least some financial foundation, not as a replacement for her mother, but as a fragile echo of what Morgan would have wanted for her. Morgan's family has always insisted on one thing. They don't want the world to remember her only as the woman shot in her driveway. They want people to remember that Morgan was a fighter, a young woman who worked herself to the bone so her daughter wouldn't go without. She was a gentle mother, willing to sacrifice everything for Amelia. She was a woman brave enough to say no to harassment, to refuse to stay quiet in a workplace that made her uncomfortable and unsafe. She was someone who stood up, collected evidence, and prepared to challenge a system that found it easier to ignore the problem. One of Morgan's sisters said, "Morgan was a warrior. She was kind, generous, always thinking about others. She wasn't hateful to anyone." I want people to remember her that way, not just as a name in a murder case. Behind the headline, "Woman shot in front of her home by obsessed co-worker," there is an 8-year-old girl who lost her mother but still found the courage to face the killer in court. A mother who once dreamed of seeing her daughter graduate, fall in love, start a family, but whose future was erased by 2 gunshots. A family who refused to stay quiet, who fought not to let her death be written off as a tragic incident and forgotten. And on the other side, there is the image of a nice guy, the sort of man who insists he's so kind, just a friend, just worried about her, while deep down believing he has the right to own a woman's time, attention, image, and eventually her life. Those shaky pocket videos, those dark frames with a distant yellow porch light, aren't just evidence. They're a reminder. Some monsters don't hide behind fangs and claws. They hide behind polite smiles, quiet personalities, and phrases like, "I just care." Morgan isn't here to tell her own story, but the sounds in those first clips, the footsteps, the breathing, the rain, the stalker's diary that the killer thought no one would ever see ended up exposing him. The rest of the story is up to us, to remember her not just by the way she died, but by the way she lived, strong, kind, and unwilling to let fear define her worth.